Test, test. 1, 2, 3. 1492. Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Just trying to think, do you think that's loud enough? I was trying to go with loud. Okay, we need to do a sound check, so tell me, I hope, is it loud enough, the volume? Because I really don't know how to do anything with this, but up a little? Okay, how I turn it up is just to turn all the gains up, so. All right, how about that? How does this sound? Security? All right, so why don't we begin? In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. So this class is less theological, but if you go to the seminary, they do have this section on pastoral theology. Pastoral theology is, how do you minister to people? Well, so this class is about my vision for the parish, which sounds like a strange class, but I just think it's actually really important. And by vision is that there's a line in the Bible that says people will die with lack of vision. That, like the leadership has to have a vision, or we're going to be wandering around the desert for 40 years. Not blaming anybody, but just saying without vision, people die. And they polled 10,000 business leaders, and they said, what is the most important thing to do if you're heading a company? And interestingly enough, 97% have some vision of where you want to go in the future, which I think is really important, that where you want to go, your vision, that's 97% said that's the most important part of running a company. But then 96% said that they don't have time to articulate a vision. Swear to God, true story. Like, don't you find that amazing? But if that's true of business, shouldn't that be true of a parish? Like each pastor should, and bishop, should have a vision of where you want to go. Otherwise, you're just, a ping pong ball bouncing all over the place. Or, worse, not doing anything. It just becomes a dead parish. And so, like, my first, well, I shouldn't say that. That gave it away. I was with this one priest who, he was a nice guy. I'm not saying he was nice, but he literally had no vision. And I was kind of shocked. I'm only newly ordained, and he literally had no vision of what he wanted other than Mass on Sunday and confessions. That's all he wanted. Now, that's not true. He probably did want a really alive parish, but all he wanted to do was Mass and confessions. But that's about it. And not that he was a bad guy, but he had no vision of what to do. Another guy I know, nice guy. It's not a question of being a nice guy. His vision of the parish, I actually know two people like this. His vision was like he wanted the parish to be a monastery. That he had this, as he would joke, he'd say, I really should have been a monk. He wanted the parish to be like a monastery, where, it's this quiet place of reflection. And that is one valid way of doing church, right? There's nothing wrong with being monasteries. But my challenge to him was, well, the problem is monks, they eat together, they pray together, they work together, they go to the bathroom. Like, you are, but sorry, yeah, but like, if you're in a monastery, you'll live and die with these people. What's that? I don't know if they're married. But I know what you meant. But like, you're with them 24/7, so you're on the road together. And I said, that's not true in a parish. Like, here's Barbara, there's Gail. I see them twice a week. That's not the same thing as living in a monastery. Does that make sense? That's so, like his big thing is he wanted quiet 24/7 in the parish, which does happen in a monastery. But the problem is that all the other stuff that the monks do, work together, live together, it doesn't form community. It's really a type of hermits coming together if you try and make that as a parish. Does that make sense? And then eventually, the parish just becomes a sacramental gas station where people come together. And like the guy that said he wanted it as a monastery, I mentioned that, but monasteries are a community. And he says, well, I wasn't ordained for community. I was ordained for sacraments. So guess what happened to the parish? Yeah, it basically died. Because, yeah, you are, but technically, if you actually read priesthood, diocesan priesthood, you're there for the community. So monasteries are fine, but I don't want a monastery. I want a parish. Or I was going to give another example of vision, but now I can't remember. Oh, so community is important. Having a vision is important. So, I've been here for 1 year, so kind of want to give my vision. Now, the problem with a vision is that I don't have time to do everything, right? Because somebody said to me, and they're right, what about divorce ministry? You should start a divorce ministry. Well, number one, divorce ministry is really, really hard. No, it really is hard. The program is not hard. Getting somebody to do it is hard. Are you thinking, really, that's hard? Yeah, because people rather serve the dying and the sick than the divorced. Because, this sounds kind of strange. Everybody is, the moment you get divorced, your friends don't want to hear about it. Your family doesn't want to hear about it. Your children don't want to hear about it. It scares them. They'd rather face death than divorce. So my point being is that divorce ministry, you have to have years in a parish. And even at like Holy Apostles, which was the largest parish in the history of the state, I couldn't get people to do divorce ministry. I could get them 1 year, and after that they're like, there's a lot of anger here. Rightfully so. So what I did, this sounds strange, what I did is I found this woman who was great. She went through a divorce. She went through a really bad divorce. And she's social and smart and a talker. So my divorce ministry was, I asked her, I said, when people are going through a divorce, because I tried it for 1 year, divorce ministry, well, I actually went for 2 years, and then the couple in charge said, it's just too hard. So I used this woman, not this woman, but a woman who was really good. And when somebody would get divorced, she would call them and say, if you ever, and she'd explain, if you ever need somebody to talk to me. Don't talk to your children. Don't talk to your best friends. You'll burn them out, trust me. And so it was a coffee ministry. But that's the best I could do. So a lot of people say, you should do X, Y, Z. I don't have that much time. Does that make any sense? So just on this, if you say, well, how come you're not doing this? My first year, I kind of observed. My second year is when I'm going to implement a vision. Does that make sense? And I'm not going to do everything. I'm just going to do what I think is most important. So my number one, and I actually wrote it down on these sheets of paper for you, so just on, if you flip it over. Yours doesn't have a flip? Oh. Well, you got the wrong one. See, yeah, it's a small one. Just because that way you can keep track or take notes. So I'm going to try and start writing outlines so it's easier for people, or I'm going to try and figure out how that screen works. But my number one goal this year is to build a sense of community. So this sounds kind of strange, but there's this whole psychology behind a community, and it's the seamless garment one, where this sounds kind of strange. Community is incredibly important for human beings. We don't thrive without a sense of community. And the problem is, it is a seamless garment, that one thread affects the rest of the garment, that all of life is interconnected. So in one sense, you could say, well, there you have the tulies. But, yeah, over there. But for the tulies to thrive, they have to belong to a community. Whatever happens to one happens to another. So the psychology of community is that your true self is actually nestled within a community. The problem was, coming out of COVID, and COVID is not really ever going to go away, in my former parish, we had terrible depression rates. We had an incredibly high suicide rate. It was suicide row for a while. People are not meant to live in isolation. For you to thrive as a human being, for your marriage to thrive, you have to live in community. Being in isolation, having nothing, no sense of purpose, that is incredibly hard, because the I am is found in a community. Martin Luther King said, and I like this, I cannot be what I ought to be unless you become what you were meant to be. And it's in a community that we become our best. Now, that's very Catholic. And most Protestants' theology is just me and God. I accept Jesus. Or they translate it, my Father has many mansions. It's not mansions, it's dwelling place. And if you start thinking, well, my thread is the most important, the whole thing unravels. The power of community, it changes everything. And this does sound strange. I love the book of Leviticus. I know I make jokes about it, but you know, the book of Leviticus says, part of it is if you form a strong community, you know who it cares for? The outcast and the poor. So the book of Leviticus repeats over and over again that you have to take care of the poor by creating a system that allows them to thrive. It never says give them anything they want. Give the poor anything they want. It says no, you create a society that the poor can escape poverty if they want to. So in the book of Leviticus, sorry, I just knocked some stuff over. In the book of Leviticus, belonging to a community allows you to become the best person you're meant to. The community doesn't do everything for you. The community allows you to change. Now, the problem is, of course, just because in case somebody complains, you can't ask people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps if they don't have feet, let alone boots. But that's where the community really pulls in. But there's this great book. I love this book. It's called The Big Potential. Anybody else read it besides me? The Big Potential by Sean Aker. Nobody? Okay, nobody. Does anybody love Jesus or love to read? Or it is a great book, and luckily, he's hilariously funny. You can just watch his TED Talk if you don't want to read the book. But the odd part is that he does all this research, and the research is pretty slam dunk. You want your kid to thrive in school. You want to become your best person. The big potential, like this sounds kind of strange. We as Americans, we teach the small potential. That's where we put our efforts at. Like, what is Babs? She hates to be called Babs. She's going to knife me after this. What is Babs' math scores? That her tiny math scores and her science scores and her English scores. Does that make sense? We test the small potential. What are your grades? But what they found is that when kids thrive is when there's a lot of interconnection in the community. So yeah, we should test the small potential, your math scores and your all that. But we should also be looking at, for the kids to really grow, big potential matters. So they've done all this tests. I'll give you one example. They did it actually right next door in Spokane. And they took zip codes. Does it matter what zip code your kindergarten lives in? Believe it or not, yeah. It's shocking, and this is Spokane. We're pretty much, that's like us, white bread. Everybody's pretty much the same. But the problem is, so you have two zip codes right next to each other. But this zip code has an incredibly high divorce rate, a lot of single families, a lot of and this one has a lot of fathers, a lot of families, Which kids are going to thrive? This one. Same school system, same economic background, but one is more sense of community. And the odd part, you could say, but no, your family's a really strong family. It doesn't matter how your small potential is. It matters how your small potentials matters in this community. Human beings are the species that is the most community-orientated. And so my point being is that, wow, just psychologically, we were meant for community. That's how we gain the most. Now, going to theology, what is church? Church is a community. Church is a family. If you notice in Scripture, Eden starts out with this place of shalom. The Garden at Eden is a place of shalom. Shalom is actually not just tranquility. Shalom in Hebrew means unity. that we're united to God and each other and even creation. Heaven is the new Eden. Heaven is pictured as a city of compact unity where everybody loves each other. Heaven, church is community. Heaven is other people. Or if you look in the Bible, this sounds strange. Look in Exodus. Nowhere in the Bible do you see God save an individual. Religion is not about saving a soul. Religion is about saving a community. So Moses does escape Egypt, right? He escapes Egypt, meets God, and God's, the burning bush. And God says, oh no, you have to go back into Egypt and get everybody. That Moses is not saved until he goes back and gets everybody. Does that make sense? So the point being is that how does God save? God always saves in the Bible through a community. Yet everybody thinks about the small potential. It's me and God. Or the Sabbath. To keep the Sabbath or the Passover, you have to celebrate it not as individuals, but as a community, a family. Or Proverbs. I love that line in Proverbs. Woe to the solitary life. Woe to anybody who just thinks about themselves. How can they ever, the proverb goes, how can they ever bloom? Well, or St. Paul. St. Paul is always mentioning, one God, one baptism, one Eucharist, one Spirit running through us all that makes us one. The Bible is about unity. Christ offers us a new type of unity, not based on politics or nationalism, but the Holy Spirit. So community is important. And the word devil, what does the word devil mean? What does the word devil mean? Good job, divider. Holy Spirit is a uniter. I got to stop that. And the devil is a divider. So the image of church is supposed to be a family where we love each other, a place of compact unity. So, yeah, a parish could be a monastery, but not really, because we'd have to live and breathe every day together. So I don't really think a parish can be a monastery. The other image of churches is a field hospital versus a museum piece. Now, are we supposed to be a field hospital that takes care of each other, or a museum piece of one certain time period? That's a whole different way of doing church. If it's a museum piece, then it's just about, doing something from the past. But what the word tradition means is keeping the fire alive, not worshiping ashes, not worshiping something that happened, in the 17th century, but keeping the fire of what it means to the Holy Spirit, that we live in unity. So my first priority is actually building up a sense of unity, hospitality, and even I love the name St. Pius. St. Pius X, he once asked his curia, his cardinals, he says, what does the Catholic Church need the most? And somebody says, we need more priests. And he said, no. And somebody else said, we need more Catholic schools. And he said, no. He said, what we need is parishes united together in faith. What we don't need is more, not more fundamentalist Catholics who want to say, let's circle the wagons and get the bad people out. What we need is communities of love and faith. St. Pius is right. So here's the real pastoral question. How do you build up a sense of unity? What's a method? Because I really don't have the answer to that. This sounds strange. Roger LaChance, Father Roger LaChance, you know what his gift was? He was really good at socializing. He was an extrovert. That was his gift. Now, I have to admit, and I have the test to prove it, I am an off-the-scale introvert. If I go over to your house for dinner, you know what I'm really thinking? Can I get to bed by 8:30? I was telling Deacon Chris, seriously, I'm an off-the-scale introvert. But I love being a priest, and so you had to learn how to come out of your shell. It's not an option. But so how do you build a sense of unity? I'm not Roger LaChance. He can walk in and schmooze every room. And here's the thing. I don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want the community to be about me. Does that make sense? I want you to fall in love with each other. And so this sounds strange. If you notice, I do all these little socials. We had one, the block party. It was really fun. It was, anybody go to the block party? Wasn't that fun? And it didn't last too long. You know, I got to bed by 8:30. It was fun. You know, and here's the thing. It's not socials. Don't make the mistake about my plan. It is not socials for the sake of being an extrovert and social. It's social because I want you not to fall in love with me. I want you to fall in love with each other. And, like, there's different ways you can build up. And there's that real-life church in Post Falls. And, you know, they made their center social and sports. But the problem is, if you look at the stats, it's the fastest-growing church in the United States, except most of those churches fail. Because the moment the pastor leaves, everything falls apart. They have a high death rate. They've made it about social and sports, but they die out really quickly. It feels good, but it's not really Christ-centered. If I leave and everybody falls apart and leaves, then it never really was a parish. We want to fall in love with each other because in each other is where you find Christ. I don't want the priest to be the center. I don't even want the social life to be the center. I have socials, so you fall in love with each other. And I was kind of shocked because when I got here, this one guy said something very, very wise. And he said, you know, I've been in this parish for years. And he said, you know, I've been in this parish for years. I like this parish, but we've never really been loyal to the parish itself. Now, we're just not, that hasn't been St. Pius. Even when we're social, it was little groups that were social. And that's interesting. And then, I might as well tell you, this weekend, there's this religious ed conference. I didn't go to it, obviously, I was here. But one woman said to one of my staff members about northern Idaho, and she said she used to live up here. She tends to be conservative, so she's not some wild liberal. And she says, oh, yeah, I lived in Coeur d'Alene. She says, I've never met a religious community that is so divided. Like, I know, it made me think, well, that's kind of true, I hate to tell you. Like, think about this. In my former parish that had 9,000 Catholics in it, that's as many Catholics as there are in Post Falls, Coeur d'Alene, and the surrounding cities. 9,000. Do you think we have 9,000 Catholics in Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls? No way. So we had 9,000 per weekend. Now, well, in the parish. But here's the odd part. Not a lot of division. Up here, there's a lot of division. And so part of my socials is to end the division. That sounds strange, but I want a morality. Morality itself is slightly based on unity. I know you don't think so, but trust me, psychologically they found morality is partially based on how united you are with other people. I'll give you an example. There's this famous historian named McNeil, and McNeil joins the army years ago, and in the army they did a lot of marching. Why are we doing all this marching? The odd thing is, it says, the more that we march together and work together, he said he felt this change from an I to a we. And he does become this famous historian, and looking back, he says, why were the Greek and Roman armies so powerful in conquering? Because they functioned as a we. That was much different than the surrounding. They could have weapons, no offense, the Germans, the Franks, they could have weapons and huge armies, but they didn't function as a we. And why do soldiers risk everything? Not for their own advancement or pain or simply a military contract. What they found out is that soldiers will risk everything going back into battle because they are loyal to other soldiers to the point that they're willing to die for them. So what they found out is that unity creates its own morality. And these bodily rituals, like marching together, creates what's called a hive switch. A hive switch is this bonding as a social organism. That if we do like movements like marching or standing and kneeling and sitting, believe it or not, it creates a switch where you start to think as a one social organism. That's why armies do marching. Did you know if you dance together, even if we did a line dance, which I'm incapable because somehow, seriously, I've tried once. It wasn't pretty. I think I accidentally poked somebody in the eye. But like dancing together, once again, causes this hive switch. And this hive switch, you have this sense of unity. Oddly enough, laughter creates a hive switch. Music, physical closeness, gathering together, you start to care for each other. You know, the hive switch is not always a good thing because sometimes, psychologically, you have communities of superiority. Communities of superiority, it does push unity, but it also pushes division. So fascist leaders are excellent at creating community, but it's community on who we dislike. That those people are the problem, and we're better than those people. But so historically, it's really interesting. Fascists are great at building community, but they always destroy themselves. So my point being is that I don't want our parish unity built by fascist means. That we are so much better than those post-falls people. We are so much better than Mormons. Does that make sense? Now, I don't mind talking about what's the difference between Mormons and Catholics. Love that stuff. But anything, or even within Catholicism, and I hate to tell you this, it's a big problem up here in northern Idaho. You have groups of Catholics who think that they're the real Catholics. So those are communities of superiority. Now, I'm not against competition either. They've also found out I love competition. Here's the really odd part, but this is mostly for men, I got to be honest. Studies on competition is a great way of building, binding people together as long as a competition is not divisive. So if we're a company and say, okay, we're going to have a competition in this group versus this group, it doesn't matter even if you're on opposing teams. You become more united. But if you say, you have the competition, but it's divisive, you're ruining the company. Does that make sense? Now, just one other thing, difference between men and women. Did I tell you this? There is a difference between men and women. Write that one down. They did this huge study. You know how mostly women build a sense of unity? Is they tell a secret, either about themselves or somebody else. Well, not necessarily gossip. Maybe it's about me. Maybe I tell Barbara, I'm actually a great line dancer. You know how boys create community? Competition. Now, here's the odd part. You could be on the opposing team, and, I played against you, and they are loyal to each other even when it's boys love competition. So my only point being is that when I'm talking about divisiveness, I'm not talking about competition. I'm talking about divisiveness. And the problem is communities of superiority create divisiveness. And that divisiveness always ends up destroying the community itself. So I'll be honest, I did live in the Bay Area, went to school in Santa Clara, lived in LA for a while. I love California. But part of me, I find California politics disgusting. And just my opinion. But so I was mocking, it's not right, but I was mocking Californians. And then I read this study that you have to be careful with that because I could, let's say we're all from Idaho, I mock Californians. Oh, sorry, yeah, you are. So I mock Californians. Do you know what, though? even if we're all from Idaho, this little community will fall apart. You introduce the poison of divisiveness, even if it's us versus them, you destroy your own community. So I told my staff, I said, listen, if I ever make a California joke, call me on it. That's going to destroy our parish. That divisiveness does not help us. Does that make any sense? So, I think it's morally wrong now to mock Californians. We're just planting the seeds of our own falling apart as a community. Maybe the world has imperfections, but isn't it better to be united in our imperfections rather than be divided by our perfection? That my point being is that we have to be very careful. So my first goal is to build unity, but unity through, and I don't know how to do it, but the sacraments, of course, but also I want to have all these socials because I want you to fall in love with each other. But I don't want it to be a unity based on we're so much better than that group or that religion, or Californians are better than, the Montanans, or no divisiveness. Competition, great. So my first goal is unity. Feedback, objections, complaints. No, if I was California, I'd move here too. Can't blame them. Yeah. That's interesting. I never really discovered it. I'm just speaking as an outsider. But there's a lot of divisiveness up here. I don't know what the cause is. Because it doesn't make any sense to me. At one time, this was a small cowboy town. When did it become so divisive? Why? Well, here's the other thing. I don't even really care the cause. All I know is that it's affecting me now. I don't know how somebody got cancer. I just know we got to get rid of the cancer. Oh, I remember that. I know, I was like, oh my God, you missed the whole point of this parish. Competition, great. But to say we're better than St. Pius, like, why would you do that? We're trying to... the Catholic Church has enough enemies. We don't need to fight each other. My second goal, it sounds strange, is RCA and evangelization. Remember, Christ sends them out. We're supposed to convert the world. We're not supposed to become a little group unto ourselves. We're supposed to change the world. God calls Abraham, his family. Abraham's family is supposed to turn the whole world into one big family. And if you read the Old Testament, part of the reason why God is upset with the Jews is you're supposed to convert the world. And the priests, they wanted to become a community unto themselves. It was great for them. They had all the power. But they were supposed to convert the world, not go to war with the Gentiles. So as Christ sent out the apostles, we're sent out. Not to leave, but we're sent out here. We're sent here to really evangelize the world. So there is this philosophy that a lot of priests have. Well, if you open the doors to the church, they'll come and become Catholic. Let me guarantee you that doesn't work. Nobody's beating down the door to become Catholic. All the evidence is you have to go out and get them. So this sounds strange. In my former parish, we called it the Welcome Project because I love names. And we called it the Welcome Project where the Welcome Project is tough. We want to welcome people into the church. So we had Bring a Friend to Mass Sunday. You'll hear me start saying them, invite people to the Catholic Church. It's not me, it's you. Does that make any sense? We can hold open houses, block parties, but once we become united, why wouldn't we be inviting other people into that? We're commanded to. Does that make any sense? So evangelization, I think, is really important. And I think people really want it. But like the Welcome Project, this sounds kind of strange. And it's a little harsh, so we decided as staff we wanted to be a house of joy. So like we changed the theme, but we wanted to make sure people felt joy and welcome. So we had a welcome desk. We had tried to build up a philosophy of welcome, which is tough. So I'll give you an example by welcome. So there's some people, it's not me, that are super good at hospitality. Not me, but so we would have 2 people per weekend. Now, I'm not going to start this here, but I'm just saying the mentality because we have the number. That we'd have 2 people who would be not hospitality ministers in the sense of, hello, here's your bulletin. But they'd be people who, if the ushers has somebody who has a question, say, well, go, Barbara, could you answer their question? And they'd be at the welcome desk. And we are registering per weekend, like 5 families per weekend. But then we worked on like this group, the adult ed group, that keep your eye open to welcome people. And so I'll give you an example. We had one family who came through RCIA, and I always ask, like, why did you become Catholic? And they said, well, we moved to Meridian, and we're looking for a church. We're not Catholic. It was a beautiful church, so we decided to go one Sunday. And he says, your masses are very confusing if you're not Catholic. The stand, the knit, sit, and he said, we're sitting there, and I was getting more and more angry because I don't understand what's going on. And there was a little old lady next to him who finally puts her hand on his hand and says, let me help you through this. And so she said, we stand when we're talking to God, we sit when we're not talking to God, and we kneel when we worship. And says, let me just show you this. And he made her his sponsor when he did come into the Catholic Church. But like you need people who's not saying, this is my Mass, I'm just focused on the Eucharist. Really? What about welcoming these people? Clearly, they're not Catholic. Does that make sense? They're not Catholic. Why? Or, this is amazing. I had when I was at Holy Apostles, several non-Catholic ministers who became Catholic, which was a real problem. Like one woman, she was a pastor of a co-Christian community, and she kind of amazed me. She says, I love those people. And sometimes I go back and check on them. He says, but like I didn't like their fundamentalistic view of the Bible that Catholics don't have. And so she said, I was really attracted to Catholicism because we'd have these Bible classes and theology classes, and she was well educated, but she just didn't like that fundamentalism. And she said, but what really made me want to become Catholic is that I walked into the parish, and you could tell in this huge church, people love each other. Her former parish is very judgmental. They're very, wives be submissive to your husbands type. Or this other guy, he went through RCA, he joined RCA, and he was a pastor of this, he was one of the youth pastors of the mega church. And he only joined the RCA because his wife's family is Catholic, but him and his wife are very anti-Catholic. And he was always arguing with them, so he only went to the RCA class so that he could find out dirt to complain about. But once again, like the odd part is that he's kind of amazed because it's his theology that starts to crumble. Like, there's that part of the Bible, and like, does that make any sense? He says, but then he says, I have this problem because he says, I do want to become Catholic, but I have a well-paid job. They pay him very, very well. And I could get a job as a teacher, but that's a really nice salary he's earning. He says, but the problem is I no longer believe what I'm preaching. And he says the problem is that like he has two girls and goes to that other place, and how does he really look his daughters in the eyes saying, I don't really believe some of that stuff. I believe in Catholicism. I believe in the Eucharist. It's clear in the Bible, but I got a good paycheck. How am I supposed to ask them to be moral and honest if I'm not? So anyhow, the thing that, once again, pulled him over the edge, that's just a theological argument. What pulled him over the edge? It was the parish life. So he actually would come to Mass occasionally, but he loved how people cared for each other. His church was more about entertainment, but he said, you guys take care of the poor, you take care of each other. Like, it's the community. My point being, trust me, and I'm really good at theology. Theological classes never convert anybody. You know what converts people? Community. A sense of joy. So, like, this sounds strange. Our welcome project is, we keep our eye out for somebody who might be struggling in Mass. We make sure people feel welcomed. So one thing I do want to do is, and this sounds strange, for RCA, I want to do testimonials on Facebook. Getting people to talk is tough, but there's some really interesting, I can't tell you how many people I've met who can say, I was anti-Catholic and then this happened, and I'm not against my former church. They're great people. I just want something more. Like just a 1-minute testimonial on Facebook of why at St. Pius I became Catholic. Does that make any sense? Like, it changed the mentality that, we should be welcoming these people. Does that make sense? Or, I want to do one on Deacon Chris, because I'll explain that in a second. Because, he said, he married this woman named Mary, but one of his problems against Catholicism was he doesn't believe in institutions, which is pretty funny since he is a cop, or was a cop. Like, that's kind of, but he grew up in Rathdrum where you don't, but, once he realized, the institution, because that's what he always thought, is trying to control all your decisions. And then he said, no, I get it. The institution of Catholicism is not trying to control you, but make sure that we're all becoming the best that we can. And then strangely enough, now he's part of the institution as a deacon. But I also want to have a returning Catholics class. What about those who've been away from the Catholic Church? For whatever reason, they're hurt, Part of evangelization is we welcome them back too. Part of evangelization is that I want to have once a year what I'm going to call it an evangelization retreat. An evangelization retreat is not about outsiders, coming and getting evangelized. It's about insiders, where you have evangelization retreat. I did it at all my parishes, where you just have a retreat weekend where the whole retreat and prayer is we want to become a better and better community that other people would want to join. Does that make sense? And then small faith communities. Small faith communities were really powerful in my former parish. So people would form small faith communities, and they'd get together. Like, one guy kind of surprised me. You can get together as often as you want. They'd get together once a month, and he said, ex-military, he says, I was always Catholic, but I never really took it that serious. But then I joined this small faith community, and I really fell in love with these people. And he says, I would have been shocked if you would have told me 10 years ago that my favorite night of the month is when my small faith community gets together. Then you have cells in a body, they're strong, and this one's strong, and it just creates a different, I swear to God, it creates a different feel when you have small faith communities. And it doesn't matter what you call the small faith community, but you guys are starting Teams of Our Lady? I don't know what's going on. But you have all these small, or my former parish, I love these. I had these adult ed groups, and this one group of little old ladies, I shouldn't put it that way, but they were sitting at a table, and they decided to go out to lunch. And then for like 7 years, they've been going out to lunch. And when COVID hit, it cracked me up because they would gather together in the porch. And they've been there through illnesses, and they became this little small faith community. Does that make any sense? Just naturally. I want to promote that. And I also want to promote adult education. Purposely Catholic videos, adult education, to deepen and to be able to defend your faith. So, evangelization. Gotta warn you, I'm looking at the clock and I'm way behind. I'm going to do some architectural changes to the parish. It needs an update. Now that's, every time you change something, I have two things. One, it costs money. B, I don't want to alert the city. Because then I'm afraid they'll come in with government regulations saying, oh, you need this and that and this and that. So, like, I hate our carpet, but the pews need to be, the stuffing needs, those kneeler cushions are, but so I moved the tabernacle, right? Because I like it there. I hated where it was. Boy, I got some people really upset with me about that one. But so I'm going to be changing things. I'm going to get a different cross. I'm going to change where the confessionals, the sacristy is. I don't really want a cry room, and I don't like the way, I'll be honest, I don't like the way St. Pius is laid out. Like in most churches, architecturally, you'll have a foyer, and then a sound barrier, and then the church. You have no sound barrier. You have no one entrance for security. And the problem is, people talking after Mass, you can't really do the rosary. Like you want to keep those spaces with some sort of sound barrier. There's no way I can change that, and unless we completely redo it. But I'm going to try and make some changes so that there's some changes there. It won't be perfect, but I'm going to make it. Now, here's the thing. I already know I got some people with some complaints, but warn you, complaining does no good to me. Complaining actually has the opposite effect. This woman from St. Thomas came over, never met her, and she wanted to meet with me because she doesn't like the changes I'm making to the parish. And I'm kind of surprised by that. Like, that's a bold move. And I said, now, are you going to be joining our parish? No, but I heard about the change you're making, and I said, well, let me tell you, I'm going to still make them. She says, well, that's the problem. You're bullheaded. I said, well, yeah, but if you've already decided I'm bullheaded, why did you want this appointment? Like, because I'm not going to change. You don't even go here. So complaining, naysaying doesn't help. I'm going to change the RE program because our RE program was really just a homeschool program. I want the kids meeting here at least once a month. One thing one of the best parts of St. Pius, I actually think, is it has a history of service. I was really impressed when somebody from the local government said, if we ever need any help, who always shows up, who donates, who shows up, who does it? St. Pius. I was really impressed by that. And yeah, we do a lot on feeding the poor and meals for the homeless. Now, we do service for Christ, not ego. Nor do I want St. Pius to be a welfare program. Like, I'm kind of hard. I don't believe in giving out gas money because I'm not in charge of your vacation or travel plans. But you need food, medicine, warmth. We'll be there for you. So St. Pius is to be love and care for the homeless and the poor, not a gas station. Does that make any sense? Like, I'm kind of hard that way. So this sounds kind of strange. It's pretty simple. Unity, community, a house of hospitality. But evangelization is going to be my focus. Education is going to be my focus. RE, and yes, some architectural changes. What's not on my vision is also important. This sounds kind of strange. I noticed this a long time ago. My first year of priesthood. Not my first year, but the more that a priest spends time he spends on the computer, the less he's actually doing parish work. And so I don't want to be answering a lot of emails. And I saw this T-shirt. A friend texted. I wanted to show it up. It was a hilarious T-shirt. Priest, it was at a parish and saw it, took a picture, emailed it to me, and it says, "Read the bulletin. It's been announced 20 times." And the funny part is, like, if I spend endless emails, that you could have just read that in the bulletin. Like, so the other thing is I do, and I've already mentioned this, want to deauthorize naysayers that complaining is not a strategy. And one thing I noticed, somebody mentioned this, this guy who's in academia in a college, and he says, why are the arguments in this university so bitter? And the reason why is because they're so small. That when the stakes are when the stakes are really big, like an earthquake or something, like people come together. But when the stakes are small, people fight like cats and dogs. I'm just not going to do that. Or naysaying. I'm not going to fight about things that are stupid and small. Does that make sense? So if you write an email of complaint, Y, X, Y, Z, and it's some tiny little matter, I'm just going to delete you. No, but why am I going to spend 20 minutes answering an email of a complaint? Because, that's this email of complaint from one woman. Once again, she's not in this parish. She goes to St. Thomas, that she doesn't like my humor. Well, the odd part is, I love to laugh. And like St. Philip Neri said, every parish should be a house of mirth. And when you walk into the presence of God, you should feel joy and feel joy in other people. Laughter is one of the signs of the presence of God. So I don't mind giving, the truth is, I like to laugh. And I always find things in life, every day I find odd things to laugh about. Now, here's the other thing. You know, they say laughter is the best medicine. That's a lie. Laughter is not the best medicine. Laughter is the honey that you put around the pill for the medicine. Laughter just makes the medicine go down easier. And so, this sounds kind of strange. If I'm going to give a homily, I'm going to challenge people. I'm going to I'm going to wrap it in honey. Does that make sense? But I still have a message. So with this woman, I did ask her, I said, well, okay, you don't like laughter. Tell me the type of homily. Tell me a priest whose homily you liked. Tell me one homily you remember. And she said she couldn't. And I said, well, tell me a priest who gave homilies that you liked. And she mentioned this priest I knew, and I said, well, he was really boring. And if you can't remember any of his homilies, I got to say he wasn't a great homilist. You just don't want to be challenged, maybe. I don't know. But anyhow, this is a really big thing with me. I hate to say it. I want to avoid the culture wars. I want to avoid the culture wars so I can focus on the gospel. Our country is being torn apart, I feel, with all these culture wars. I'm going to avoid the culture wars, not because I'm a coward, but I want to preach the gospel. I don't want to, does that make any sense? Not that I don't have very strong political views, but does anybody have a position about the Ghibellines? Anybody really passionate about Ghibellines, the Guelphs or Ghibellines? Yeah, you don't know what they are. You know why? They're dead. That was what Dante was fighting, right? The Guelphs and Ghibellines. And you kind of think, wow, there's a huge fight. Italy was torn apart by this faction. The church was involved. Which one is God's side? bishops and priests took different sides. A couple hundred years later, what's a Guelph? You know what I mean? Like, all that will fade away. What won't fade away is the gospel. So people ask, are you going to talk about X? No. It's a political debate that simply will eventually disappear. I'm working for the kingdom of God. This sounds kind of strange. It's a culture war too. I want to avoid, I'm just talking about things I'm going to avoid, is we're more pious than everybody else. Because when I got here, 5 times I heard different St. Pius parishioners come up and say, oh, well, how come you're not doing choral music like St. Thomas? No, that's not the issue. So they said, it was announced that the bishop wants more masses like that. Oh, that's not true. And they said it's more reverent. So I actually just called the bishop. I said, did you ever say that? Because I heard it 5 times. He says, I never said that, would never say that. And this sounds kind of strange. I think that kind of propaganda that somehow, here's the thing. I don't care about the choral music. If they want to do it, you go for it. You love it, you go for it. But that doesn't mean I have to do it. Doesn't mean because they do it that something's wrong with us. Does that make sense? That's a silly culture war. Or during youth group for the teenagers, once a month they have this, you can ask Father Len anything, which kind of scares me. Really, no, it does. Like, I can answer theological questions, but with teenagers, I'm just not sure what they're going to ask. So this one teenage boy from St. Thomas said, how come you don't like Latin? Well, truth be known, I love Palestinian Masses. You guys don't know what Palestinian Masses are, do you? Oh, I just think they're the most gorgeous musical. And I once went to a parish where they had Palestinian music. It's Latin. It's like Gregorian chant on heroin or acid. Like, it's just dull. It's, to me, gorgeous. But I went to this parish where they played it, or, that's how they sell it. And it was dead. Dead, dead, dead. And I asked somebody, I said, well, what was your experience with that? And he says, I just didn't feel part of it. And I was like, I like to listen to it, but it's hard to really worship for me that way. Now, so to answer the question about Latin music, love it, love it, love it. But I don't want a part of the liturgy. So this teenage boy asked me this question. So I just answered. Says, personally, I love it. I just don't want it in the liturgy because it's not effective to my people. So that's my bottom line. But here's my question. And trust me, I know teenage boys. How many teenage boys is actually staying awake at night asking themselves, how come there's no Latin Mass? It's actually Latin music. You know who planted that question? Mom and Dad from St. Thomas. Like, they wanted a culture war. Does that make sense? So my position is, never ask me to weigh in and give a culture war. So I just, even Pope Francis cracks me up because sometimes he says some things that are so obnoxious. And I think it's funny. 2 weeks ago, he said to these priests, he says, enough with grandma's lace. He said, you think the liturgy is about throwing in more lace. Nobody cares about your grandma's lace. You know what they want? Not lace, but leadership. Wow. I'm not concerned about that fluff. I'm not going to enter into a culture war. So what are our challenges here in Coeur d'Alene? So that's my vision, what I'm not going to do. Then my question is, and this is a really good question to ask myself, what is the challenges of the Coeur d'Alene? One is, it seems to be a divided community. Secondly, I noticed among people, there's a real anti-institutionalism. There's a mistrust of institution. I think that's illogic. I really do. I just think that's completely illogic. But it's popular. Anti-authority, institution is just really popular in the United States. And the Catholic Church is an institution. Does that make any sense? So how can you get converts if people are anti-institutional? And this sounds kind of strange. I do this podcast, and somebody asked me a question. They said, well, it doesn't matter what the question was. And the question was, the letter of Hebrews, Christ is the high priest. Why have priests? And so the answer is, well, the whole history of the Old Testament, God is talking about priests. And when the Messiah comes, he's going to make Gentile priests. Just because Christ is our high priest doesn't mean there aren't any other priests. Just because Christ is the good shepherd doesn't mean that he didn't send out other shepherds. He literally does. He tells people, the 12 to shepherd. So Christ is not anti-institutional. And I said, her pastor said, no, anybody can just lead. And I said, the problem is in those churches, they pop up and then they fall apart. And to me, and this sounds kind of strange, it's like stolen valor. Do you know what stolen valor is? Stolen valor is you dress up as a Navy SEAL and go to the air. There's a video on this where there's this guy dressed up as a Navy SEAL. There just happens to be some other Navy SEALs in the airport. And I don't know this stuff, but with like the insignias that they wear and stuff, it all means something. So if you're not a Navy SEAL, you could put it on wrong and mix. Does that make sense? So they started asking me, what's that? Why'd you put that there? What's this? Clearly the guy's not a Navy SEAL. He said, yeah, you like going to the bar to get the free drinks. You like getting first in line, because they're at an airport, first in line. But they said, you didn't serve in the institution. And so one of them says, you take that shit off. Because that is stolen valor. You weren't part of the institution. You don't get to have its rewards. So her pastor says, you don't need education. You just need to believe. I said, yeah, that's strange. He says, oh, you don't need an institution. You just can get up and start preaching. But that's kind of stolen valor. I went through years of education, practice. Does that make any sense? And this guy pops up and he says he can just preach the Bible on his own, but that's kind of stolen valor. Does that make it, because you didn't, would you trust a doctor? Would you trust a doctor who said, I just got up one day and decided I think I should be a neurosurgeon? Why would you not trust him if he didn't go through an institution of a medical school to earn the right to do that? Why would you trust an accountant that never went to school? Somebody who goes through an institution, your expectations are higher. Now the problem is, Coeur d'Alene is very anti-institutional. So don't be surprised. You had our symbol was the papal shield of St. Pius from hundreds of years ago. Do you notice I did away with that? Why would I put that? If I know Coeur d'Alene is anti-institutional, why would I make the image of church institutional? Does that make sense? I'm not against the institution. I'm part of the institution. But if you have a problem with it, why do I need to make that the image of church? Does that make any sense? So one of the problems of Coeur d'Alene is divisiveness. With the divisiveness is kind of this circle the wagons, us against them, anti-institutional. The other problem is, and it's not a bad problem. I think you notice problems so you can make them work to your advantage. I don't know how, but I'll make that anti-institutional thing work to my advantage. I'm not going to go head, I will with you guys, go head one-on-one what's wrong with that, but I'm not going to argue it to get them. Does that make any sense? Yeah, that may be a bridge too far. The third problem I think of Coeur d'Alene is we're having this huge influx of a population. How can we make that to our advantage? Now, I'm one of these who thinks it is a moral sin, I really do, that all the good farmland is being taken up with suburbs. I think that is one of the stupidest things. If COVID taught you anything, we import all our stuff from out of, our food, medicine, and COVID, the whole thing shut down. I think nothing, like Galileo said this, why would you fight over gold? Living soil that can breathe life is more important. Well, I may have opinions about the influx, but once again, I'll mention it to you, but why would I greet people coming to Coeur d'Alene with that one? It is what it is. They're coming here, they're refugees. How do we make that work to our advantage? Does that make sense? So that's just a problem that we'll have to negotiate. But so in a nutshell, that's my pastoral vision. So questions of, so on this sounds kind of strange. I am not brilliant, but, this sounds strange. That's why I put these questions. You don't have to fill it out. Please don't feel obligated. If you don't know what to say, don't fill it out. I don't have time. But if you have, you didn't think of this, or I just have 3 questions. It just might focus my vision, if that makes any sense. Am I missing problems? The 3rd question is, what other challenges do we have? Because if you're going to have a vision, you have to know where the potholes are, so you can write those down. Okay, so questions, objections, confusions? Okay, does anybody know, like in the summertime, I want to have more light. This is light. I think the next one is theology of color. Is that right? Because I don't know what's going on. Is it theology of color? So our next classes is, and that sounds strange, but it's kind of, it's September. Wow. No, it says September. Wow, that's kind of funny. Well, that means July, August. I have to tell you, now that I did that, just because I would like to have these classes, maybe we'll have a couple classes in August, but it's going to be something light and funny. Does that mean, not funny, but I would, and I'm going to hold a scripture class because I think that's important. And one day I'm going to hold a scripture class in the book of Leviticus because I love it. But I'm afraid you guys will be bored stiff. All right, God bless you. See you later. Thanks for the cookies.